Turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro electro tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Greetings once again, all you groovy cats and pretty kitties. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electrotech. And here on the bench we have this Marantz Model 4300, which I believe originates from the early 1970s. I'm not sure exactly how long of a production run this unit had. I think a handful of years. I could be wrong. I'm just going off the top of my head. Now this came to me with a customer complaint that it is exhibiting some intermittent behavior, intermittent signal that the customer attributes to dirty controls. I haven't confirmed this. That's obviously what this unit is here for, so that I can, function test it, give it a look over. I'm going to do a preliminary on it. I have the hood popped on it right now. I'm going to just do a cursory inspection. And of course, as I get deeper into things, I'll perform a more in-depth inspection. But the first thing to do is I'm going to safely power it up. I know it's a working unit, the customer uses it, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to power it up safely anyways. Things can change at the drop of a dime. So anyways, but we'll power it up safely, and then I'm going to get into just some basic function testing, go through and while I have a scope hooked up to it, I'm going to, play around with the various controls and switches to see if I notice any jittery behavior, any intermittent behavior on the scope. I'll just start out doing that just on the scope, and then I'll get it hooked up to the shop speakers, but I will take the usual precautions and so forth. And we'll see what there is to see, hear what there is to hear. So I'm going to dive into it for starters and get this powered up on the current limiter and go from there. And of course, here we are on the top side. I'm just going to go over this briefly before I get into power up and function testing. So yeah, we have a nice looking unit here as far as all the components that I could see in the wiring. It's dirty in here, dusty. There's the usual fuzz and stuff. If you want to buy this, let me know. But anyways, everything's looking good. Otherwise, I'll eventually clean everything out and whatnot. But yeah, and get covers removed. Like we have all these covers on on our FM multiplex circuitry here, the FM front end, our Dolby noise reduction system here, and the AM section over here. I'm going to get these covers off eventually and just kind of inspect things a little bit more and what have you. And there's this cover over the dial string and all that. So just get some things out of the way eventually. I'm not going to do that right now, but otherwise everything's looking good. We have our main amp sections here and our nice big beefy power transformer, our reservoir caps, and again I'm going to inspect what I can as I gain access and look for components that look stressed, overheated, bulging, anything physically leaking like electrolytics and so forth, and just do what I can with the time that I have, because I'm not performing a full restoration or a recap on this. The customer, like I said, just wants me to see what there is to see in terms of the intermittent signal complaint, which he kind of attributes to dirty controls, which, as we know, is a very, very, very common occurrence when you have filthy controls and switches and all that. We know that the signal can get noisy, staticky, intermittent, cut in and out and all that. So like I always say, and I say it every time, I like to remove that possibility from the equation anyways, being that all of this gear from this era needs to have controls serviced if the controls haven't been professionally serviced in many, many years, decades. So that's an endeavor in and of itself, to gain access to all the controls so that I can properly clean them and relubricate them. Gaining access is a little bit more of an endeavor in these units. So that alone is going to take some time. So I'm certainly not going to get into a full bore, restoration recap and all that. At least not at this stage of the game. If maybe down the road the customer wants me to do this later, when I can kind of schedule it in and I can take it on, then that's fine. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, of course, that I'm going to be installing this this replacement antenna. The original one broke off, and the customer also wants me to install his new face on this unit. It's a black Marantz face. So, you know, matter of preference. I like the silver face era of units. That's the look I prefer, but hey, to each his own on that. And it's going to look very nice in its own right. And anyways, I'm going to be relamping this as well. I forgot to mention that. So it's not as straightforward relamping these as with some receivers. So anyways, that's where I am. So let's go ahead and get into the power up. Okay, so I'm going to bring it up on the current limiter, but I'm not going to really explain you know, the current limiter theory and all that stuff. I'm just going to get to it, and some of you out there know what a current limiter is, and it's just that. It's limiting the current to this stereo unit, so if something was to go wrong, you know, it wouldn't run away and go into meltdown mode. So I'm going to start by bringing in a 40 watt bulb and heavily current limit this receiver. You're going to see the bright glow come about initially, because especially on a small 40 watt bulb like this, it's going to glow pretty bright, and then it should go down a little bit. And it's going to stay illuminated because the size bulb, you know, it's limiting current pretty heavily, but especially in a big bruiser of a unit like this. So here we go. Let's go ahead and just get to it. Yeah, power switch is engaged. Okay. Okay, and it's still illuminated, of course, but it did glow brightly and then dim down a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and just wait a few seconds here and just kind of keep an eye on that filament. It doesn't look like this receiver is trying to short out or draw heavy current or anything like that. So I'm going to kick in a 60 watt bulb in addition to the 40 and feed it a little bit more here. Okay, and things just got a whole lot dimmer, so that's good. Let me kick in our last bulb, and I'm sure we'll get the relay. Yeah, and there it is. All right, and here's the belly of the beast. Everything was looking good on the current limiter. After I shut the camera off, I excuse me, had it hooked up for you know, a few more minutes or so, and as expected, not a single hiccup. And I don't have too much to say about the underbelly here because I don't want to get into a lot of a chit chat about that, but I just up to this point performed a preliminary inspection, looking for the usual stuff: stressed out components, things that look overheated, you know, bulging electrolytics, leaking electrolytics, funky looking wiring, connections that just don't look right, you know, things like that that just kind of pop out, stand out, and all that. So the usual stuff that any tech should do. So otherwise, it's all about servicing the controls. That's the next phase I'm going to get into. I'm going to monitor things for a little while, and you know, as I'm monitoring things, I will go through in a little bit more detail and get the magnifier in here and, you know, look at things a little bit closer and glance up at the scope and, you know, kind of, you know, watch the scope as much as I can. I mean, I can't stare at the oscilloscope forever, but I do want to monitor the outputs and see if I notice anything as far as any anomalous, you know, waveform activity, anything looking jittery, or, you know, the signal cutting out, you know, obvious stuff. And, you know, the not so obvious, you know, looking for, you know, distortion or anything that's going on, because the customer did say that he experienced something going on with some intermittent behavior and all that. Could that be on account of the controls? As we always sort of discuss here when it comes to working on controls, absolutely, controls can cause a lot of problems, connection issues and all that. And bad controls, meaning, you know, really filthy or otherwise defective, are classified as a connection issue because, you know, obviously you have contacts inside of potentiometers, you have contacts, you know, on the selector switches. So if you have something impeding the the connectivity of these contacts. And yes, you have a connection issue, obviously. So that's what I mean when I say connection issues. Yes, connection issues could also be bad solder joints and the terminals that wires are hooked up to and all that. Sure, you can have bad connections all over the place. So that's where I am right now. I did notice a little bit of a noise in the controls. I'm going to show you that in just a moment here. And also too, I got to access the push button switches up top here. Do the best I can to get those flushed out. A few in particular that I'm a little bit more concerned about than some of the others. Most of them seem to be okay, the push button switches, but I probably will just perform some light maintenance on those. So I'm going to do that, but there's a couple of switches that I want to focus on the most, and that's the main speaker switch. I was having some issues with that. It was causing a bit of intermittent behavior, and when I worked it several times, pushed it in and out, pushed it in and out, pushed it in and out, and all that, it kind of cleared up. But that switch is definitely going to need some servicing. All of them are going to get it, but some are going to get it more than others. All of the pots are going to be serviced in detail. Lots of flushing, reintroduction of fader lube, all that kind of stuff in the appropriate amount. The selector switches, like I said, they're going to be cleaned out really well. I'm going to use some little micro brushes and dip them in contact cleaner, get in there very carefully. You've got to be careful when you're moving through these selector switches especially. You can see they are absolutely inundated with wiring. It is a spaghetti factory. So when you're moving this cluster of wiring and you're moving the the various selector switches and trying to move the boards and all that stuff, you got to be really careful because you do not want wires to pop off the various connection points. And you're sitting there saying, man, where did this go? Where did that go? So when you're moving them, you also want to pay very, very close attention to the switch and really keep your eyeballs scanning around as you're moving it to see if you can, just in case you might witness a wire popping off or something. So you want to try to catch it if you can. But you can avoid problems just by not creating any undue or unnecessary tension on the wires as you're moving them. You might have to liberate these wires from the, various or numerous little twist ties and all that, so that you can free them up a little bit and get achieve a little bit better flexibility of these wires, that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to throw that little note or tip, whatever you want to call it. Not that it's rocket science, but you get my point. Is that you have to be really detail oriented when you're doing this stuff. Just to avoid problems, so that you don't feel like a one-legged man in a butt-kicking contest in the end when you're sitting there scratching your head saying, man, I noticed a couple of wires popped off, where the heck do they go? And you're sitting there, with schematics and trying to figure out this and that. So save yourself the grief and really pay attention and move everything as a unit very carefully and all that. That's very important to mention. Watch what you're doing. Look before you leap when you're moving these boards, trying to get these selector switches out so that you can gain access to properly clean the contacts and all that. So anyways, I know that's kind of a long-winded thing, but it is what it is. There's a lot to be done just with the controls alone. So I got my work cut out for me there. Then I need to relamp this unit, peel the dial face off and gain access and whatnot. And like I said, I'll do the best I can with inspecting everything else that I can kind of comb through. And the very last thing I'm going to do after all the monitoring is done with the scope, whether I witness something or not, then I'm going to once the controls are all clean and I've removed problematic controls out of the equation, then I'm going to hook them to the shop speakers and listen to this unit for several days, test the different outputs, hook up a turntable, hook up a tape deck, this and that, and just spend some time just listening to tunes in the shop as I work on other stuff, so that if any other issues come up, or if there is some intermittent signal, if I lose a channel or whatever the case, I might be able to hear it rather than witness it on the display of the oscilloscope. Okay. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. So that's what I'm going to be doing with this unit. And if things prove to be uneventful, I don't know how much more video footage I will roll. I may roll a little bit more when it comes to, you know, cleaning the controls and the little selector switches, and I might go into that. I've done videos on that before, but I know, you know, some of you guys might like to see more of that, so I'll just maybe do it anyways. And also too, for the customer as well, you know, give him a little bit of a record of, you know, kind of what's being done here. You know, also if I have the time to do it. So I may or may not, so we'll see. So that's about it. Let me go ahead and pan over to the oscilloscope, and we will see what there is to see as I manipulate some of the controls. You can see a little bit of the noise I'm talking about. Then we'll check the output. That'll probably be it for this particular video. Okay, so let me get a little bit of a signal on the display here. I'm just going to move through the controls just kind of quick here. And then we'll check the output power and all that. And you can see the noise that I'm talking about in the controls. I don't see anything going on that's causing a loss of signal. Just dirty controls, really, at this point. Yep, just your typical sign of dirty controls, really. But I don't see any loss of signal in either channel. And by the way, I have the channels sitting on top of each other, okay? I don't have two traces on the, you know, on the display. That's because they're just sitting on top of each other, both channels, in case you're wondering. So our balance doesn't look bad. Our front and our rear, front and rear balance. It's a little bit noisy, but again, the controls need to be serviced, and yeah, that high filter is a bit finicky. You know, it's a little problematic. So anywho, that's that. Let me go ahead and just bring this up to clipping and see what we're outputting here. This is 100 watts per channel when it's in 2-channel mode, and 40 watts per channel in 4-channel mode. I checked the 4-channel mode earlier just to see what it was putting out, and you know, it was exceeding its specs, and I suspect that the 2-channel you know, mode, 100 watts per channel, will do the same. Let me bring it on up to clipping, and then back it off just a hair. Okay, there we are, clipping. $159 watts. So that's excellent. You know, so my main objective right now, and I'm not really going into any in-depth testing, obviously. I just want to monitor this some more, but you know, ultimately I want to get the controls service, like I said, so that I can remove any problems within those controls from the equation. So other than that, I'm just going to cut this video here. As I always say, peace, love, music, and the vintage audio that brings it to your ears. Till next time, you take care.
This is a poor man's shoe production.